So in this lesson, we are going to continue with the calculations that we were doing in the last video. And we are going to look at a different calculation, which is calculating moles. We haven't come across the term moles before. It's got nothing to do with those very little animals that live underground, okay? It's a chemistry term. We haven't come across it before. And in this lesson, rather than kind of explaining the concept of a mole and what a mole is, I'm first going to show you how to calculate moles, because that's actually really easy. I'm going to show you how to calculate moles. And once we are all comfortable with calculating moles, I'm going to explain what exactly moles are and how they are used. I know that sounds like a backwards way of doing it, showing you how to calculate them before telling you what they are. But the calculations are really simple. And I want you all to be able to do the calculations, and then we'll look at the kind of concept behind moles, and we'll look at how they're used and why they're so important. For this, you will need a formula triangle, and this is, if you're doing combined science, this is the only formula triangle that you need to know in chemistry. If you're doing triple, you've got one or two more, but there's very few triangles or formulas you need to learn off by heart in chemistry, but this is one of them, and I'm going to write it as a formula triangle. And at the top of my formula triangle, I'm going to write mass. And the unit of mass is always grams. And down here on the left, I'm going to put in moles. Okay. And the symbol for moles is mole, M-O-L. Okay. And over on the other side, I am going to put what we looked at in the last video, which is relative formula mass. And this can be abbreviated to MR. I'm going to draw this, my triangle's a bit of a mess, as a triangle. So that would be multiplied. This would be divide, and okay, mine isn't really going to look much like a triangle. Try and make yours look more like a triangle. And this is going to be a formula triangle, okay, with mass at the top, moles and relative formula mass at the bottom. Okay, so I'm sure you've seen formula triangles before, but I'm just going to go through how to read them, okay? So if you are using your formula triangle and you want to find the formula of mass, then you are going to cover mass, cover what you are trying to find, and what you are left with is the formula, okay? So if I want the formula for mass equals, I cover mass, and I'm left with moles multiplied by relative formula mass. So the formula for mass is moles multiplied by relative formula mass, okay? If I were trying to find moles, what I would do is I would cover moles, and what I'm left with, actually I'm going to cover all this, what I'm left with is mass divided by relative formula mass, okay? So if I'm trying to find moles, it's going to be mass divided by, so this line here is divided by relative formula mass. Divided by relative formula mass, okay? And then if I am trying to find relative formula mass, okay? If you're trying to find relative formula mass, you could use your triangle and write mass divided by moles, okay? But typically, you're going to use your periodic table to find relative formula mass, just like we did in the last lesson, okay? You're going to use the mass numbers from the periodic table, add them all together, and you're going to find your relative formula mass. But technically, from the triangle, you can also write mass divided by moles, and that's going to be your relative formula mass, okay? So cover relative formula mass, I'm left with mass divided by moles, okay? You need to know this triangle off by heart, but all you actually need to remember is that mass goes on the top, okay? It doesn't matter which way around you put these two, as long as you've got mass on the top, and you know how to use your triangle, you'll always get the right formula, okay? So it doesn't matter whether these are these two are left or right, okay? You can have these whichever way you want, but mass has to be at the top. Once mass is at the top, you will always have the right formulas, okay? So if we look at an example of a question or how this question is going to be asked, they might ask you, how many moles are, sorry, moles is commonly written without the E, okay? How many moles are in 30 grams of NaCl. Okay, that would be a typical question. How many moles are in 30 grams of NaCl? Okay, so the first thing I would do is I would look at my triangle. Okay, I'm trying to find moles, so I know I need mass divided by relative formula mass. Okay, so I'm going to write down my formula. Moles equals mass divided by relative formula mass, which has the symbol MR. Okay, the mass is given to me in the question. The mass equals 30 grams. Okay, if you know that grams is the unit of mass, then you should always be able to pick out the mass from the question. Okay, whatever number comes before the G, that's going to be your mass. That's given to you in the question, so I know that mass is 30 grams. Okay, so I've got my mass. I now need to find my formula mass. In the last video, we looked at calculating relative formula mass. Okay, you're given a formula, NaCl, you need to calculate the relative formula mass. So looking at my formula, I can see I've got one sodium, Na, and I've got one chlorine, Cl. I would then go to my periodic table and see that the big number next to sodium is 23, the big number next to chlorine is 35.5. And what I would do is I would just add those numbers together. So I'm going to have 23 plus 35.5, and that gives me 58.5. Now I'm going to write myself a little note. Big numbers from periodic table. So when I look back, I know where I got those numbers, okay? So I can see where I'm getting my 30 from, but the formula mass of NaCl, I'm getting that from the big numbers of the periodic table. And if you're unsure of how to calculate, then go back and watch the other video again, okay? I'm going to assume that you can calculate relative formula mass. If you can't, watch the other video again and message me if you're confused about it, but I am going to assume that you can now calculate relative formula mass. So 23 is the big number next to sodium, 35.5 is the big number next to chlorine. I add those together and I calculate my relative formula mass. Okay, so my formula for moles is mass divided by relative formula mass. I've got the mass. I've now got my relative formula mass, okay, which I've calculated from my periodic table. All I need to do is plug those numbers in. So it's mass, which is 30, divided by relative formula mass is 58.5. Plug those numbers into my formula and I will calculate moles. It's going to be 30 divided by 58.5 equals 0. You get it as a long decimal. I'm going to write it as 0.51. I'm going to round it to 2 decimal places, okay? 0.51. And that's how you calculate moles. I'm going to do another example with you, and then I'm going to get you to do 1 or 2 by yourself. So how many moles are in 50 grams of CaCl2? Okay, how many moles are in 50 grams of CaCl2? I need a formula for moles. Using my triangle, I cover moles, and I see it's mass divided by relative formula mass. So that is my formula for moles, mass divided by relative formula mass. Okay, I need to know mass and I need to know formula mass before I can calculate moles. So mass, I see from my question, is 50 grams. Okay, any number that comes before a G, that is going to be your mass. Okay, mass is 50 grams. And I need the formula mass of CaCl2. So I'm given a formula in the question, CaCl2. I need to find the relative formula mass of CaCl2. Okay, I go to my periodic table. I see the big number next to calcium is 40. Okay, so I've got a calcium, I've got a chlorine as well. The big number next to chlorine is 35.5. And I've got 2 chlorines. So I'm going to have 40 for the calcium plus 35.5 plus 35.5. Okay, I've got 2 chlorines, so I've got 35.5 times 2, and then I'm adding that to the 40 for calcium, and I add that up, and I get 111. Okay, so I've got my mass, and I've now got my relative formula mass. Again, I'm calculating this from the big numbers of the periodic table. You'll always have a periodic table, so you'll always be able to calculate relative formula mass. And now I just need to find moles. is mass divided by relative formula mass. So it's 50 divided by 111 equals 0.45. Okay, and this tells me that in 50 grams of CaCl2, I have got 0.45 moles. And again, I will go through with you exactly what moles are and why they are important in the next lesson. At the moment, I just want to focus on calculating them. I'm going to give you a few questions to do, okay, using that formula triangle. The first few questions, I'll give you the relative formula mass, so you don't even need to worry about working it out. And then the next few, I'll want you to do everything. I want you to use your triangle, calculate your relative formula mass, and calculate moles for me, okay? So please, if you don't have one already, grab yourself a calculator. You're going to need a calculator to do the next part of the lesson. Okay, so I'm going to start you off with just these 4 questions. I've asked you how many moles are in the following. So in each question, I have given you the mass. In the first 3, I've given you the mass in grams. The last one, I've given you the mass in kilograms. So you will have to convert this to grams before you do your calculation. Okay, in each of the questions, as well as giving you the mass, I have given you the relative formula mass. So you don't need to go to the periodic table and start adding up the big numbers. I've already done that for you. So all you need to do is look back, find your formula for moles, and plug the numbers that I have given you directly into that formula. In D, make sure you convert from kilograms to grams before you do that. Press pause, do it for yourself, and press play when you're ready to see the answers. Okay, so there are your 4 answers. In each case, you are taking the mass and you are dividing it by the formula mass. So 30 divided by 44, and I've rounded it to 2 decimal places. Don't worry if you haven't, just check that you're getting the same answer. The next one, the mass was 100 grams. I'm dividing this by 36.5. The next one, the mass was 250. I'm dividing it by 63. Okay, so you're just dividing mass by formula mass in each question. And the last one, the mass I give you here is in kilograms. So before I do my division, 1.4 divided by 17, okay, I first need to change from kilograms to grams. And to go from kilograms to grams, I multiply by 1,000. So 1.4 multiplied by 1,000 equals 1,400. Okay, so I've got my mass, 1,400 divided by formula mass, equals my moles. Okay, make sure you always have mass on top. You are dividing by formula mass and you're getting your answer for moles. Okay, so in the next round of questions, I want you to do the same thing. You're still calculating moles, but this time I haven't given you the formula mass. You will have to calculate that yourself. So I've given you the mass in grams in the first 3, the mass in kilograms in the last one. Okay, so you're going to have to do that conversion again. So you've always got the mass. But instead of giving you the formula mass, I've just given you the large numbers from the periodic table. You will need to use these numbers to calculate relative formula mass. Once you know your relative formula mass, you've already got your mass, you can find moles. Okay, so you're using the same formula over and over again, mass divided by relative formula mass, but you need to find your relative formula mass first. Okay, press pause, have a go, and press play when you're ready to see the answers. Okay, so I've got the answers. All right, the first one, what I've done first is calculate the relative formula mass of KCl. 39 is the mass number of potassium. I'm adding that 35.5 for chlorine. 74.5 is my formula mass. The mass I gave you in the question is 60, so 60 divided by 74.5 is 0.81. Formula mass of FeO, I've got 1 iron and 1 oxygen. 56 is the mass number of iron. 16 is the mass number of oxygen. Add them together and get 72. The mass I gave you in the question, moles, is mass divided by formula mass. So it's 100 divided by 72 equals 1.38. Formula mass of CaSO4, I've got 1 calcium, which is a mass of 40, 1 sulfur, which is a mass of 32, and I've got 4 oxygen, so it's 16 times 4. I add all that together and I get 136. The mass I gave you in the question, divide that by 136, and you get 2.30 moles. The last one, again, I start by calculating formula mass. 40 is for calcium. I've got 2 bromines, which are 80 each, which gives me a total of 200 as my relative formula mass. My moles, is going to be mass divided by formula mass. Okay, again, mass in this question, I gave it to you in kilograms, so I need to multiply by 1000 to convert to grams. 3.59 multiplied by 1000 is 3,590, so it's 3590 divided by 200 equals 17.95 moles. Okay, so I know I haven't spoken about what moles are yet, but it's really, really important that you can calculate them. And as you can see, you can't calculate moles if you can't calculate relative formula mass. And you can't calculate relative formula mass if you can't read chemical formula. So if you've got any questions about reading formula or calculating relative formula mass, please do message me on Teams and let me know. It's really, really important that you're able to do that in order to access all of the rest of it going forward. It's really important that you learn that formula triangle. Okay, typically you are asked to calculate moles, so you'll be given the mass in the question. You find relative formula mass using your periodic table. Mass divided by formula mass equals moles. Okay, that's typically the type of question that they might ask you, but they can ask you also to find mass. So if they asked you, what is the mass of, okay, what is the mass of 3 moles of sodium? Or what is the mass of 1.2 moles of calcium chloride? Or what is the mass of 3.5 moles of potassium bromide? Okay, so they can ask you the question in this way instead. So what is the mass of? Okay, if I flick back to my formula triangle, which was here, if I'm trying to find mass, okay, then I cover mass in my formula triangle and I'm left with moles multiplied by relative formula mass. So it's moles multiplied by relative formula mass. So now I go back to my questions. Okay, what is the mass of 3 moles of sodium? I need to do the number of moles, which is 3, multiplied by the formula mass of sodium. So sodium is just one atom by itself, and the mass number of sodium is 23. So it would be 3 multiplied by 23, and that would give me the mass. Okay, if I wanted to do what is the mass of 1.2 moles of calcium chloride, it's moles, which I've got in my question, is 1.2, and then I multiply that by the formula mass of calcium chloride, which we got on the other page, I think. Surely I can. Yes, it's 111. And I'd multiply that out. If you were asked what is the mass of 3.5 moles of potassium bromide, it's moles, 3.5, I've got that from the question, multiplied by the formula mass of potassium bromide, which I calculated was, potassium bromide, actually no I didn't, it's going to be 39 plus 80, which I should do in my head, is 119. Okay, so they can ask you the questions in that way. You're using the exact same formula. Same formula triangle, just a different formula. It's going to be moles multiplied by relative formula mass. You'll get moles in the question. You'll calculate relative formula mass from your periodic table, and you'll just do the multiplication on your calculator, and you'll work that out. The homework that I've set for this week is a mixture of these questions. It's written homework. It's not going to be submitted on Show My Homework. So what I want you to do is do the work and then take a photo of it and send me the photo. You can, if you're doing it on a computer, you can upload the file to the assignments folder in our Teams, or you can just take a photo of your work and just message me on chat with your work. But when you are doing your work, and when you're sending me your work, when you work out your final answer, can you please highlight your final answer or put a box around or write your final answer in a different color? It just helps me to mark it really, really quickly if you've highlighted what your final answer is. Okay, so please, please, please highlight your final answer when you are doing your homework.